I mean, you know diamonds all over Africa are on the ground. You can pan for them in rivers like gold. You know diamonds on a real chart of gems are in the semi-precious range. They're not even at the top of the semi-precious range. They're down in the middle. They're like agate or something. But agate is all over the world. Diamonds are only in a few places. Now, they did discover a hoard in several areas of Arkansas. I knew about this a decade before it was admitted in the news. My dad has friends from college in the diamond business, some of the biggest, who would talk about how evil the Oppenheimers and De Beers were and how they ran this world monopoly of diamonds. But when they did find diamonds in Arkansas, then they found diamonds in Canada. Both cases with this French family that my dad, knew going way back to college days and then Dallas. In both cases, they would come in and have the government announce it to be an environmental preserve, even if it was land they bought, and the government would move to block them. But then they were still able, in one case, to sell the property they'd bought to the government for $3 billion. Oh, that's the best part. The U.S. government, other governments, pay money to people so that they can't use the land that has the diamonds. It's the same thing with power and water and everything else. They are training you that it doesn't exist and there's not enough of it. Yeah, there were all this lecturing about drought. And there is a surface drought in Central Texas. The only place there's a true drought is in West Texas, where they really do have their aquifers running very low. They could drill their wells deeper, but the point is that there is a real drought in West Texas. There's a surface drought in Central Texas, and they're on the news. Don't wash your clothes as much. Wear your clothes 3-4 times. Don't drain your swimming pools. Water once a week only at night. There's no water. Only the state is allowed to keep their public fountains going because they're God. I saw that this week. Meanwhile, driving to work the other day, I drive by 3 golf courses, and I meant to do a report, but then I got late and didn't do it. I'm going to shoot an iPhone report for the website. I pulled in, and in the morning, the sprinklers were going. Everything was green, and I pulled over to a greenskeeper at one of the places. I pulled into 3 of them as they're just lined up driving into work. And I pulled up to a greenskeeper, and I said, "Is that city water?" And he goes, yeah, we're on that. I mean, I worked at Great Hills, so I already know that. I worked at Great Hills one summer in college, but this is a complete joke. This is a complete joke. They've got neighbors tattling on each other. My neighbor watered more than once this week. Oh, my gosh, I'm going to call the police on him and give him a $500 fine. When you could, if the government didn't block it, sink a well anywhere in Central Texas, 500 feet or more, for maybe $10,000, $15,000, and hit water. I mean, I live out in the country, and there's a dry creek bed, and if you walk down at 100 yards, there's an area full of catfish and bass and everything that's spring-fed. It's just running, because right below the ground is just giant oceans of water. You know, I said I'd get into this Ron Paul FEMA camp report, and I'm going to get to it. You know what? I did probably 15 hours of preparation for this radio show today. Saturday, I was up till 2 o'clock in the morning last night. I probably was working and researching 6-7 hours today. And, you know, I haven't covered really any of the news. Oh, here's one. Air Force raids gun shop. That's News 8 CBS, Las Vegas. The U.S. Air Force led a raid against Las Vegas gun shop Friday. We'll be right back with the martial law news. Stay with us. Ron Paul.
I have a quick question while you're saying that. Do you think Americans are justified in thinking that H.R. 645 could lead to detainment camps for American citizens during martial law?
I don't know this number. You'll have to tell me.
The emergency center establishment.
Yeah, I know that's their goal. They are setting up the stage for violence in this country. No doubt about it.
Yep.
H.R. 645, establishing emergency centers for disaster relief and national emergency. Here's Ron Paul one more time. On HR.
Setting up the stage for violence in this country. We get down about it.
All right, now there's that report. I hope that Robert Wanek, a friend of the show, will also post it without the music because it makes it not as conductive on radio. But you see something like this, Ron Paul being asked, hey, should we worry about Americans and FEMA and people being put in these camps? Yeah, that's their goal. They're setting up the stage for violence in this country. No doubt about it, responded Ron Paul. And then we have our full reports and congressional hearings dealing with this legislation. Now, here's what's scary about it. When we got this bill now a year and a half ago, and we read it, it was exactly what I'd seen at urban warfare drills with Army, Marines, FEMA, and others. And I videotaped all this in the late 90s. The Marines would come up with their machine guns and say, turn your camera off. It's all in my film, Police State 2000 and Police State 2, The Takeover. 1999, 2000, two films I put out. And we said then with economists, this isn't coming now. They're just preparing the military and getting everybody ready for it and having the military. I also interviewed in those films and in future films like Road to Tyranny, military officers who had raided gun shops going back even into the 1980s as part of secret programs. So there's a long-term secret program to get rid of posse comitatus. Now you see regular Army at the Kentucky Derby or at the Super Bowl, or you see the Army running DWI checkpoints in Los Angeles and other areas. Now it's just in your face. It's just, and Homeland Security admitted 2 years ago, we've got a deal for Brigade Homeland starting with 4,000 troops. It'll then be 378,000 troops. And now they've announced they've got 100,000 ready. They've got to have the 300,000+ ready by 2012. I mean, they are getting ready for this. And then if you talk about it, you get laughed at. Just like earlier in the year, I said, well, here's the different power commissions saying they can't open new power plants and the population's grown, so they're going to have rolling blackouts in cold weather and hot weather. We put an article together, and the White House attacks us and says we're crazy. And then today, it's all back in the news. Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Washington Post, Reuters, you name it, all saying exactly what I said 6 months ago. Top private intelligence group comes out and says bin Laden wasn't killed at that compound, according to their analysis and their sources. Of course he wasn't. I mean, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we're being lied to. Obama said we'd be in Libya days, not weeks. It's 4.5 months later. Every week they say Tripoli is falling. I'm not a fan of Gaddafi, but I'm an even bigger enemy of the real al-Qaeda groups that is admittedly the leadership of the rebels. You know, that's admitted. And you can't dress this thing up. You can't get away from reality. You can't get away from the reality that hundreds of power plants are now being shut down that aren't insiders, and power prices are going up because there's less competition, and there's blackouts happening. And the White House's response is, we're crazy, even when the Texas Commission says it's happening. Texas supplies the power to 5 states. The dominant power supplier to 5 states: New Mexico, Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas. Have you noticed your power prices went up? The city of Austin came out last year and said, we're going to double power prices. What was it, $3.6 billion the next 2 years? We're going with the carbon taxes. What is a carbon? Well, what does it do to charge people more money for power? Has nothing to do with it. China builds 3 power plants a week. We build less than 3 a year. This is the deindustrialization of this country. I'm digressing. Here's the headline. Ron Paul, they're setting the stage for violence in this country. They're, meaning Homeland Security. We have the other reports on it. And we have our other report dealing with it all. Let me just go ahead and play you a clip now. The clergy-response-teams. We got these documents 3 years before local newscasts around the nation, this is out of New Orleans, aired pieces telling the public, yes, it's true, your preachers are being paid by the government and trained to tell you to go to camps and turn your guns in and take shots. We got these documents in 2005. Man, time's flown. 3 years later, it comes out. People thought we had fake documents, even though they had the phone numbers to FEMA on them. Okay, I mean, how creepy is that? They've got preachers, now over 100,000 nationwide, trained to spy on their flock and to tell them to submit to government. Here, okay, we're going to play the DeFazio first. This is a congressman wanting to see the martial law plans and being told by Bush he can't see them under the presidential decision directive. And it's the same under Obama. See, we effectively have a dictatorship, not of the president himself. He's a blackmailed, kept, controlled teleprompter reader, no matter who it is, unless it's Ron Paul. They're all globalists paid for over and over again to get to this point. They've proven themselves political prostitutes. And you have to understand the office of the presidency now through its executive power. I mean, look at Obama launching wars without congressional approval. Obama putting carbon taxes in without congressional approval. Obama just legalized 300,000 deportees, saying, I don't need Congress to pass amnesty. I might deport felons. I feel that violates federal law, immigration law. See, that's a dictator. And it's getting worse by the minute. Let's go ahead and play the clip of the congressman talking about the martial law plans.
Most Americans would agree that it would be prudent to have a plan to provide for the continuity of government and the rule of law in case of a devastating terrorist attack or natural disaster. A plan that provides for the cooperation, the coordination, and continued functioning of all three branches of the government. The Bush administration tells us they have such a plan. They introduced a little sketchy public version that's clearly inadequate and doesn't really tell us what they have in mind. But they said, don't worry, there's a detailed classified version. But now they've denied the entire Homeland Security Committee of the United States House of Representatives access to their so-called detailed plan to provide for continuity of government. They say, trust us. Trust us, the people who brought us Katrina, to be competent in face of a disaster. Trust us,
all right, that's
the people
enough.
who brought us warrantless wiretapping and other excesses eroding our...
And it's only expanded. Now, we did pull up the clergy response team clip. Just go to YouTube and type this in. It's also on my film, Police State 4, The Rise of FEMA. Now, the very first word gets partially cut off. She says, will martial law ever be declared in America? Here's that clip.
All ever become a reality in America? Some fear any nuclear, biological, or chemical attack on U.S. territory might trigger just that. And as KSLA News 12's Jeff Farrell discovered, the clergy would help the government with potentially their biggest problem, us.
Oh.
From my cold, dead hands.
Charlton Heston's famous declaration captures a truly American value, the overarching desire to protect our freedoms. But gun confiscation is exactly what happened during the state of emergency following Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. U.S. troops also arrived, something far easier to do even now thanks to last year's elimination of the 1878 Posse Comitatus Act. That forbid U.S. troops from policing on American soil. If martial law were enacted here at home, like depicted in the movie The Siege, easing public fears and quelling dissent would be critical. And that's exactly what the clergy response team, as it's called, helped accomplish in New Orleans.
Jeff, the primary thing that we say to anybody is let's cooperate and get this thing over with, and then we'll settle the differences once the crisis is over.
Such clergy response teams would walk a tightrope between the needs of the government versus the wishes of the public.
In a lot of cases, these clergy would already be known in the neighborhoods in which they're helping to defuse that situation.
For the clergy, one of the biggest tools that they will have in helping calm the public down or obey the law is the Bible itself.
All right, stop right there.
Romans.
Did you hear that? The government versus the people. The government's biggest problem, us. I thought we're the government. Romans 13, we're the government. It's the government that's been taken over that's not obeying the law. It's the government that's criminal. You're not supposed to obey Hitler or Stalin. We'll be right back with more congressional reports.